An American aircraft carrier, valued at $8.5 billion, cruises through the Pacific. Aboard it are over 5,000 personnel, nearly 90 fighter jets, hundreds of missiles, advanced radar, automated cannons, and what's considered the world's best defense system. Yet, in just 6 hours, it was approached by 50 small, suitcase-sized drones, which breached the deck, damaged radar, caused fires, and injured several sailors. No advanced machine guns or hypersonic missiles were used, just technology that most people would dismiss as nothing more than a toy. These one-way kamikaze drones nearly brought a nightmare to the entire United States. What exactly happened on the supercarrier USS Nimitz? How did America's state-of-the-art fortress fiercely resist to win against a surprise attack from what seemed like harmless weapons? This is a detailed, dramatic, and accurate simulation of what could bring the pride of the U.S. Navy to its knees in the middle of the ocean without a single shot fired from the enemy. If you believe this story deserves to be widely known, please like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to avoid missing our most realistic and breathtaking military videos. The resilient floating fortress in the ocean. When waves crash against its hull, they aren't just hitting the triple-layered steel of a warship, they're touching a piece of modern military history. The USS Nimitz CVN-68, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier of the Nimitz class, commissioned in 1975, has surpassed every standard of power, durability, and strategic influence the world has ever known. For nearly half a century, this vessel has traversed every ocean, participated in dozens of hotspots, and proven that true strength lies not in ostentatious displays, but in the ability to endure and be ready to act at the right moment. The USS Nimitz is 333 meters long and weighs nearly 100,000 tons when fully loaded. Its deck can carry up to 90 combat aircraft, along with over 5,000 people from sailors, technicians, and pilots to military doctors and combat commanders. They live, eat, sleep, train, and fight on a multi-deck steel structure, operating like a self-contained city in the middle of the ocean. Beneath its gray paint are two A4W nuclear reactors, providing power for the Nimitz to operate continuously for over 2 decades without refueling. Its maximum speed of 30 knots is remarkable for such a massive steel behemoth floating on water. The Nimitz's weapon systems are not only diverse, but also organized into a 3-tiered combat logic: close range, medium range, and rapid response defense. RAM-7C Sparrow and RIM-162 ESSM missile launchers handle medium-range targets, while the Phalanx CIWS, with a firing rate of up to 400 or 500 rounds per minute, serves as the last line of defense, intercepting threats from missiles and drones to suicide boats. All of these are coordinated by the integrated SSDS combat system, where every radar signal, optical image, and sensor feedback is processed in real time. A single misjudgment here could cost hundreds of lives. Beyond its firepower, the USS Nimitz also boasts sophisticated eyes, including AN/SPS-48 and AN/SPS-49 radars, along with recently upgraded infrared optical systems. These devices help the ship actively detect small, low-flying, or stealthy targets, especially effective in modern warfare that increasingly relies on drones and unmanned aerial vehicles. All this technology doesn't just serve to repel an attack. It also embodies the core philosophy of the Nimitz to control space, maintain superiority, and be ready to fire. In a world where a satellite signal can decide the fate of a nation, the Nimitz is where the US sends a message: we are here, and we don't come alone. The presence of this ship is not to project power, but to ensure that if war breaks out, it will not begin with surprise, and it certainly will not end with negotiation. And when an unknown adversary began to direct hundreds of drones toward the USS Nimitz on a moonless night, it was from this very deck that history turned to a new chapter. Danger from the sky. The night sea was eerily calm. On the flight deck of the USS Nimitz, the last FA-18 had landed safely. Signal lights changed status, and air traffic control confirmed deck clear. Preparing for the night shift, in the Combat Information Center, CIC radar screens, signal data, and combat maps remained lit. This was usually a quiet time, where personnel reviewed data, checked for interference, and updated training orders. But at 0112, an unusual sequence appeared on the AN/SPS-48 radar. A group of small, extremely low-altitude reflective signals, moving at speeds under 200 km/h, were approaching from the southeast. The initial distance was 18 nautical miles, at an altitude of only 10 to 15 meters above the water. Initially, they were classified as seabirds, but in just 90 seconds, the number increased from 6 to 23. The phased array radar system immediately switched to analyzing flight behavior, and the conclusion left the radar operator stunned. This was a drone swarm. The analysis was immediately forwarded to the UAV Signal Identification Unit of the Multi-Layered Defense Department. Just seconds later, the answer froze the entire CIC-50 Kamikaze-type unmanned aerial vehicles, with passive stealth design, flying low and without identification signals, were heading towards the ship. All were of the same type, seemingly deployed simultaneously from an undetectable platform. There was no GPS signal, no remote control. They were programmed to do only one thing: crash into their target and explode. Trajectory and flight pattern analysis indicated these were loitering munitions with performance comparable to the Shahed 136, optimized for attacking large infrastructure targets. Each carried a shaped charge warhead of 10 to 20 kilos of explosives. And most importantly, all were operating as a swarm, an electronic flock capable of sacrificing itself, replacing lost units, and finding new paths when intercepted. The CIC immediately activated the early response chain. Data was sent directly to the infrared sensor system mounted on top of the command tower. The screen showed dozens of small heat signatures moving in layered formations, groups of 3 flying in an arrow-like pattern, constantly changing altitude and approach angles. No IFF identification signals, no radio communication responses. All were operating in absolute electronic silence. 114 Level 1 alert was activated. Lights throughout the ship turned to flashing yellow. Weapon lockers were unlocked, and the Phalanx CIWS guns began their warm-up cycle. On the deck, the refueling area was isolated. Technical personnel responsible for launching aircraft were ordered to clear the flight deck. From this moment, all operations followed the close-in defense protocol. Forwarded data from the radar showed the drones were not attacking head-on. They split formations, one group circling to the port side, another approaching from the stern where radar coverage was weaker due to the superstructure's terrain. Some drones intentionally flew very close to the water to create reflective interference, confusing surface radars. This behavior almost perfectly matched tactics observed in the 2019 attack on the Abqaiq Khurais oil facility, exploiting radar blind spots, flying in a fan shape, targeting sensor and refueling systems. 116.8 nautical miles. The combat room ordered the SSDS system to free engage mode, CIWS, RAM, and 25mm gun stations were authorized to lock on targets and fire without manual confirmation. The first contacts were established 54 unmanned aerial objects, mostly under 1.5 meters in size, at a speed of 110 knots, with no electromagnetic emissions. Some carried small, shaped charges, designed to penetrate the outer steel hull and cause localized fires. 118.5 nautical miles. The ship's bow and stern areas were locked down. All non-close-in defense personnel were ordered to retreat deep into the compartments below the waterline. Automatic fire suppression systems were set to ready. Fuel storage and ammunition magazines had their pressure-resistant steel doors lowered. On the CIC screen, optical images clearly showed dozens of small mechanical objects moving in a spiral. At uniform speed, with unstable altitude, a cluster of drones began to break off, heading directly for the starboard side where the ANSPS-49 radar was operating. Another cluster suddenly accelerated, skimming the flight deck at an altitude of only 3 meters right where refueling containers were located. The final command before engagement was issued: activate all defense systems. Abort all training operations. This is a Level 3 tactical approach. War found the USS Nimitz not with missiles or submarines, but with dozens of tiny machines, flying in silence, carrying the new language of the modern battlefield. There was no longer any doubt. The USS Nimitz was about to enter an engagement unlike any in its history, with dozens of small metal entities having a single objective: to destroy everything alive on the ship's deck. The life or death battle in the night. 120. The first rounds from the CIWS system began to tear through the night. The Phalanx Block 1B spun at maximum speed. Each 6-barreled gun unleashed hundreds of 20mm rounds per second. forming a dense steel net in front of the ship. In the CIC, warning screens glowed red, each locked in a target, instantly changing color upon destruction. But the drone swarm didn't stop. They continued to penetrate in waves, small, low, and constantly changing direction. Each time one was brought down, two others split from the main formation, weaving into uncovered areas. The entire defense system of the USS Nimitz was facing 50 kamikaze drones, simultaneously attacking from three tactical directions: high, medium, and low. An attack cone spread across the air, its apex centered on the ship, at a range of under 2 nautical miles. At least 15 drones began to lock onto the AN/SPS-48 and AN/SPS-49 radar arrays. The rest headed for the aft auxiliary deck, refueling areas, and even the main engine air intakes. Most concerning of all, not a single one turned back. There were no return signals, no external navigation data. They knew only one thing: approach and explode. The outer defense layer, consisting of Ram and Sea Sparrow missiles, managed to destroy most of the direct approach drones. But there were still gaps. A group of 5 kamikaze drones exploited a blind spot in the dead zone on the port side, cutting diagonally through the lower radar layer, where the space between the deck and the command tower created a sensor distraction zone. 122. 3 of them were cross-locked by a CIWS from 2 angles. The remaining 2 crashed into the aft auxiliary refueling area on the flight deck, where 2 MH-60R helicopters were being folded, not yet lowered into the hangar. The explosions were not large, but they caused a wide shockwave. A rotor blade was torn from an aircraft, slamming into the ship's side, creating a dent nearly 1.5 meters long. At the same time, a plume of white smoke rose from the auxiliary fuel compartment. A series of pressure drop warning lights illuminated simultaneously. The automatic fire suppression system activated, spraying a nearly half-meter thick layer of fire-resistant foam across the deck. Rapid response teams immediately ascended to the deck, carrying sealing equipment and high-pressure oxygen tanks. A crack along the main fuel line had to be sealed with rapid reaction polymer alloy. But the damage was clear. 2 sailors were injured by shrapnel, 1 unconscious due to pressure shock. 124. Another cluster of kamikaze drones unexpectedly skimmed the water, launching upwards at a distance of only 200 meters, heading directly for the command tower. Only 1 of the 3 was intercepted by CIWS. The other 2 crashed into the radar array and optical equipment. A series of electrical sparks flashed. Then the entire fire control module for the Sea Sparrow missile system temporarily lost connection. For the next 28 seconds, the entire medium-range defense system had to operate independently, reducing its target locking efficiency by nearly 40%. Below, in the casualty bay, medical teams were continuously treating 7 injuries. 3 people had chemical burns. 3 had impact trauma. 1 suspected case of punctured lung due to explosion pressure. Defibrillators, rapid infusion devices, and portable oxygen tanks were fully deployed. Inside the CIC, there was no more talking, only the sound of tactical data printers. Electronic warnings and decisive commands issued in rhythm with the clock. 126. The final drone cluster approached from the ship's stern, flying in a spiral formation, using the wreckage of shot-down drones as cover. 1 managed to bypass the radar's dead zone, crashing obliquely into an area just 10 meters from aircraft catapult number 3. The warhead detonated, causing a localized fire that lasted 17 seconds before the deck's fire suppression system reacted and extinguished it. Technicians performed a quick check. A hydraulic cable was severed. An AAG circuit board temporarily lost response. Catapult number 3 could not be deployed for at least the next 2 hours. In total, 46 out of 50 kamikaze drones were successfully intercepted. The remaining 4 caused 11 impacts, damaging radar, the auxiliary deck, fuel systems, and tactical sensor arrays. The ship remained operational. Its primary weapons were not crippled, but the consequences were clear: 7 sailors injured, 2 helicopters damaged, reduced radar power, and temporary disruption of the Sea Sparrow missile system. Estimated material damage as of 0130 was sent directly from the CIC to the escort group commander, $62 million, including deck repairs, radar replacement, restoration of damaged systems, and emergency medical care. An attack that lasted no more than 10 minutes, but for those standing on the steel deck, on the line between fire, smoke, and seawater, every second was a brush with death. Unyielding power. 131. The low-altitude radar completed its final sweep, confirming no more Kamikaze drones were within striking distance. Yet, the situation remained unstable. The ANSPS-49 radar array was lightly damaged, and the Sea Sparrow fire control system hadn't fully recovered. The aft deck was being cooled by high-pressure fans. In the Combat Information Center CIC, the lights shifted from red to yellow, signaling a Level 2 alert. But even with no direct targets, the combat commander didn't rescind the order, prepare for an immediate counterattack, with everything still operational. The first command was issued: deploy all optical sensor systems, synchronize data with long-range patrol UAVs operating outside the engagement zone. One available MH-60R helicopter was launched from an emergency strip, carrying a forward-looking infrared FLIR system to scan the sea surface within a 50 nautical mile radius. The objective traced the drone's reverse flight paths and identify the original launch area. 134. CIWS was reloaded. Technical personnel verified each gun mount had 50 femsector and 60% of its ammunition remaining. The RAM system was ordered to passive scan plus lock on after launch mode, ready to intercept any thermal signatures that reappeared, although no additional rounds were fired. Maintaining continuous sweeps kept the equipment under constant load. The surface temperature of the Phalanx guns reached 140 degrees, requiring cooling fans to operate at full capacity to prevent overheating. 138. Link 16 feedback. The carrier strike group's escort ships began to array themselves in a long-range defensive formation, outer air battle ring. Two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers activated their ANSPA-1DV radars and shared sensor data with the USS Nimitz for the first time since the attack. The airspace around the aircraft carrier returned to full cluster coordinated combat status. 141. An emergency launch order was issued. Two FA-18E Super Hornets were towed onto Deck 2, refueled via emergency lines, and armed with AGM-88E, AARGM air-to-ground missile packages, and AN/ASQ-228 targeting pods. Dual mission trace the launch area and destroy any remaining launch support equipment at sea. Before launch, the pilots received a thermal anomaly map. An unusual hotspot was identified 37 nautical miles to the southeast, possibly a floating autonomous launch platform, or an unidentified vessel that had departed the area. The sole objective: disrupt the attack chain at any remaining resupply point. 148. The two Super Hornets were catapulted with maximum steam pressure. Landing gear pressure on the deck was still being checked, but catapults 2 and 4 remained stable. The roar of engines tore through the night, launching the fighters into the air in less than 2.5 seconds. Both transitioned to low-altitude flight below 200 meters, connecting real-time data with the CIC via encrypted channels. Meanwhile, the ship's electronic warfare EW system was ordered to full activation. Close-range jamming modules began active broadcasting, creating a signal whiteout zone within a 10 nautical mile radius, preventing any remote control or final commands from remaining drones. Simultaneously, the auxiliary AN/SPS-73 radar system continued high-resolution surface scans to detect potential control devices. 153. No additional drone signals. The Super Hornets encountered no resistance. Data from reconnaissance UAVs began to record unusual movement patterns of a floating container-like object, believed to be a relay station or secondary launch platform. But instead of intervention, the pilots were ordered to merely pinpoint, mark, and return. Reason: avoid escalation. No official counterattack order. No confirmation of responsibility. The CIC downgraded the alert level to 3. Lights in the compartment returned to white normal, but no one among the hundreds of people on board felt normal. Each had just survived the largest scale attack the Nimitz had faced since the Gulf War. 205. All weapon systems returned to standby status, but did not fire. Data was stored for analysis. Damage assessment was still being compiled. But one thing was certain: the Nimitz survived, and its response from the CIWS guns: RAM missiles. To every decision in the CIC demonstrated that the nightmare of the suicidal drone swarm could not cripple the US Navy's behemoth. The unanswered mystery. 5:15s, before the sun could fully rise. High-speed boats from the Explosive Ordnance Disposal EOD team cut through the waves, approaching the impact zone. The sea no longer smelled of gunpowder, but the air was still thick, as if faint echoes of the shockwaves still lingered somewhere amidst the low-lying mist. The sea area around the USS Nimitz, within a 3-nautical-mile radius, became a crime scene. There, fragments of the Kamikaze drone's once suicide weapons now became clues. For 4 hours, the EOD team recovered more than 30 large structural components, carbon fiber wing sections, lightweight aluminum alloy airframes, charred electrical circuits, partially destroyed lithium-ion batteries, and most importantly, the flight controllers of 3 unexploded drones. Below Deck 4, a temporary technical analysis area was set up. A nearly intact drone was placed on a fixed stand. Under the white lights, details began to emerge: no frame numbers, no manufacturing labels, no commercial GPS chips. The electronic components were designed with a decoupled schematic, independent of external signals, no satellite connection antennas, and no intact remote signal reception devices. On the central circuit board, engineers discovered a pre-programmed microcontroller flight path, approach method, target selection logic, and even detonation conditions. The internal source code used a standardized binary format containing no data exploitation or reverse signal transmission code. In other words, this was a completely autonomous system, programmed to die, not to return. One of the most important devices found was a new generation inertial measurement unit, IMU, typically installed only on tactical aerial vehicles capable of operating in GPS-denied environments. This device, when decrypted, showed that the drones had traveled approximately 40 to 45 nautical miles before impact, consistent with the sea area where the FA-18 had detected the anomalous object hours earlier. In the CIC, data from sensors, infrared cameras, and the electronic warfare system were compiled into a simulated map of the entire attack, second by second, trajectory by trajectory, breakthrough point by breakthrough point. A report over 200 pages long was generated in just the first 12 hours, then encrypted and sent to the Pacific Fleet Command Center. Weeks later, the electronic counterintelligence team will continue to work with signal analysis experts from the NSA and the Department of Defense's Technical Department. The wreckage will be transported to classified facilities in Dahlgren or China Lake. Simulation systems will be rebuilt to uncover the tactical logic. Why did the last 4 drones manage to penetrate the defense layer? And on the USS Nimitz, life gradually returned to normal. The deck was re-welded with new generation composite steel. 2 radars were replaced. Aircraft were returned to the launch cycle. Injured sailors were evacuated to a hospital ship within the escort group. But despite its survival, the USS Nimitz raised concerns for the U.S. Navy's naval defense strategy. 50 small, almost anonymous drones forced a supercarrier to activate its entire defense system, launch real aircraft, and temporarily lose combat capability for over 6 hours. Total damage cost $62 million for material, $8 million for medical and casualty care, $11 million for preliminary analysis and investigation. Grand total, over $80 million. But within that $80 million cost, the world also witnessed one thing: no force on this planet can react as quickly, analyze as deeply, and recover as powerfully as the U.S. Navy. Less than 12 hours after the attack, every assessment process from mechanics to code was simultaneously activated across 3 continents, from the deck of the USS Nimitz to the Department of Defense's secret laboratories. From infrared signals to binary code, everything was deciphered with millisecond precision. The attack crippled the ship for 6 hours. But in those same 6 hours, the U.S. mobilized the full depth of its power technology, personnel, data, and tactical response that no other nation could replicate in the same time frame. The USS Nimitz may have slowed down for a morning, but the United States did not. And when the FA-18s once again ripped through the air on takeoff, the world understood America's strength isn't in avoiding attacks, it's in its ability to rise stronger after being hit directly. All content above is simulated, hypothetical, strategic, and analytical. It is not intended to incite violence, political bias, or provoke military action or war. The content is for hypothetical simulation and personal analytical purposes only. Any misinterpretations will not be accepted. We are not responsible for any understanding or application derived from the video content. Viewers should exercise their own judgment, verify information, and engage selectively. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If you are passionate about military affairs, enjoy analysis, and like to propose hypotheses, please stay with our channel. If you found this video interesting, please click like and subscribe to not miss any daily updates from us. Now, you can watch some of our latest and most popular videos currently on screen. Goodbye and see you in the next video.